Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and this evening we are going to discuss the Republican Party. Joining me on our discussion panel are Pat Chesbrough, Merrick Moses, and Daniel Thomas. There are a bunch of troubling issues supported by the Republican Party. Among them is the issue of the January 6th insurrection and the position Republicans are taking in how we as a nation should deal with it. Every attempt to examine what happened, from Trump's second impeachment trial to the filibuster's elimination of the 9/11 style commission, which was proposed by Speaker Pelosi, to the resistance that they have posed to the House Select Committee tasked with finding the truth of what led to the events of that day. All that makes me seem pretty clear to me that the Republicans in general do not want the public to know what really happened on January 6th. Is it because they would be embarrassed as a party? Is it because they're loyal to Trump? Or could it be that the facts will expose criminal complicity of many of their members in setting the stage for what happened that day? Already the select committee is telling the phone company, hold on to those phone messages. We might need to see them later. What do you think are the reasons for Republican resistance to the investigation of January 6th? Dan, why do you think they're trying to hold things up?
Well, everything that you stated in the question. Kevin McCarthy does not want to testify under oath to what he and Donald Trump spoke about on that day when Kevin was begging Trump to send the Army or National Guard to save Congress. Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I believe Ted Cruz and Matt Gaetz do not want to testify that they gave tours of Congress to people on January 5th who may or may not have shown up the next day with weapons. They don't want to expose themselves in that way.
All right, hold on a second. Now, you named some names of people that conducted the tours. So do you have sources for those names, or are you just like saying that and like generally that those people?
I cannot cite a source right now for the tour givers. No. Okay. I can say that Lauren Boebert was tweeting out the location of Nancy Pelosi during the insurrection, and that was a thing she was definitely doing. And for that, I cite Twitter. And when people show up with a gallows intending to hang you and are chanting death to Nancy, then yeah, I think Lauren Boebert was definitely directing the crowd to find the speaker.
Merrick, what's your take on the Republican resistance of the January 6th investigation?
They don't want to be criminally liable for starting an insurrection and being traitors and seditionists and insurrectionists. I mean, you literally have people on camera like Mo Brooks hollering about it's time for the Patriots to start, taking down names and kicking AWS?
That's it. That's what he said.
Yeah, that sounds like incitement to me, and he needs to be locked up and expelled from Congress. Lauren Boebert, why are you tweeting out the position of the speaker? Oh, because you're working with the insurrectionists. I'm looking at Madison Cawthorn. He talked to Trump. And I'm getting these sources from Washington Post, New York Times, Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, and Joy Reid. And they don't want to be held criminally liable. And this is the thing. Overall, they are trying to protect Mr. Rump because he was the catalyst for all this to jump off. I believe they had planned this. I don't know if they thought it was going to get so crazy, but he literally said, I think it was November, December, there's going to be a rally on January 6th. It will be wild. To me, that's probable cause to run up in his house.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not a lawyer. I work with lawyers, but that doesn't sound right. If he was black, they would have run up in his house.
Pat, why do you think the Republicans are the way they are in regard to this particular issue?
Well, I think as was said earlier, I think all of those reasons. I was looking stuff up to try to find people's opinions about these kinds of things, and NPR had reported that the Republicans looked bad at the 9/11 one when they got up and they found out that somebody had actually told Bush ahead of time that there could be that going on. So they don't want to look bad. They don't want to lose their elections. And so I think, they're afraid, obviously. How many times did they investigate
Benghazi?
Benghazi? How many millions of dollars did they spend on that? So they're not afraid of trying to find bad things somebody else allegedly did, but they certainly don't want anybody to look at their stuff. So
and the FBI.
Yeah,
the FBI was all over Hillary's server too.
What difference at this point does it make?
Okay, as I was listening to the clips of the first stage hearing of the select committee with testimonies from the 4 police officers attacked by the MAGA rioters on January 6th, I thought about how Republicans are reacting to the officers who heroically defended our democracy on January 6th.
So many of the people I put my life at risk to defend are downplaying or outright denying what happened. I feel like I went to hell and back to protect them and the people in this room. But too many are now telling me that hell doesn't exist, or that hell actually wasn't that bad.
This is now effectively a riot.
The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
For the first time, I was more afraid to work at the Capitol than my entire deployment to Iraq.
And how these same Republicans are resisting legislation for police reform to hold cops accountable for misdeeds while wearing a badge. It seems to me that Republicans want to throw good cops doing their job, like they did on January 6th, under the bus while protecting bad cops who abuse the power they wield. I'm sure there are a variety of interpretations on these 2 observations, but isn't the refusal to defend good cops at the same time you seek to protect bad cops the very essence of corruption? Merrick, is this corruption?
First of all, it's totally corrupt. And the reason why they're going after those officers who performed heroically that day, and I'm also thinking about the officer who basically saved the Republic by shooting that female insurrectionist who had no business being there. And I think that it is very convenient for them to demonize these officers, particularly the officers of color.
If a hitman is hired and he kills somebody, the hitman goes to jail. But not only does the hitman go to jail, but the person who hired them does. There was an attack carried out on January 6th, and a hitman sent them. I want you to get to the bottom of that.
And I think that one of the things that we need to think about is, politics are corrupt. We know that, right? But these people are especially corrupt. And then also, too, do we know how much fraternal order of police lodges around the country are giving these people? Because there's definitely some money involved. These people exhibit the 3 poisons: greed, anger, and stupidity. So there's definitely some money going on. That's my opinion. That's what I feel. And ultimately, I want y'all to think about this. Perhaps they are supporting cops who violate their oath because they see them as soldiers of white supremacy, who are there to prevent people of color, LGBTQ people who are not Christians from assuming demographic majorities. So the police act as a buffer to keep the colored folks, the gay folks, and the Muslims out. That's why they're supporting these bad cops.
So I led out with the idea that it is corrupt for the Republicans to feel this way about cops. And Merrick agrees with me. What do you think, Dan?
I don't think they think of the police as people so much as they think of them as useful tools to whatever particular ideology they're embracing right now. And in the case of the insurrection, we had police officers who were clearly following their oath. They were doing what they were supposed to do. They were protecting the United States government from a violent insurrection. And I'm sorry that Ashley Babbitt chose not to comply and chose to be aggressive with police officers, and they shot her as if she were a black person. Sorry. I have not heard a single conservative voice saying Ashley Babbitt should have complied. I've heard them say it about George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, who was murdered by just regular people, not even police officers at the time. So, yeah, there is definitely a double standard being applied, but they only care about the police as long as the police are useful. They only care about teachers as long as teachers are useful. They only care about people as long as they're useful to them. And I really do think that is a great reason why they care so much about the unborn, because the unborn can never become politically inconvenient. They're a perfect victim. But they don't actually care about children who arrive, because children can grow up and become problematic. You have to educate them. You have to feed them. You have to provide them with medical care. What if they are not exactly what you want them to be? What if they're girls? What if they're not straight? What if they're transgender? You've got all sorts of issues that can come along when you have actualized people.
What if they become educated and choose to vote? That's
they have a plan for that. I believe it's a question you've got coming up forward. But the Capitol Police ceased to be useful, so I guess blue lives don't matter all that much. But if you have a small town cop or a big city cop who's going to choke out a random black man, then let's get on display all the stuff that random black man might have done since second grade and prove why he was a bad person who had it coming no matter what.
Pat, corruption was what I was aiming for there with that Republican support of certain police and lack of support of other police. How do you see that?
I think it's corrupt, but I think it's hypocritical as well. I think they dedicated their platform to the men and women of the military, their law enforcement, and the first responders who stand strong in the face of danger. And yet they're not, they themselves don't stand strong in the face of danger, as far as I can see. So it's just being bad people. I'm sorry. They're just bad people with all kinds of biases and all kinds of, they've really picked up on that. If you're not loyal to me, you're against me. And, if you're not my friend, you're my enemy, and I'm going to shoot you, I guess.
Another troubling issue Bishop Barber believes to be the most troubling issue is what Republicans call election integrity. While opponents label it as voter suppression or Jim Crow 2, I characterize it as the end of democracy. Even if voters go against Republican candidates in massive numbers, the most disturbing part of these legislative proposals in state houses across the country is language that essentially states that Republican legislatures can void election results they don't like, which is exactly what Trump tried to do with the 2020 election. Every court stopped Trump But these provisions to void election results were not state laws then. In Georgia, the law signed by Governor Kemp states that the election board members who determine the results are no longer elected by the people, but appointed by the legislature. Even though the court stopped Trump with the laws on the books in November 2020, the U.S. Supreme Court, by a 6-3 decision, just upheld a new Arizona law that makes voting in that state more difficult than it was in 2020. So, what are we seeing from Republicans at this moment related to the right to vote? Election integrity, voter suppression, Jim Crow 2, the end of democracy, or something in between? Pat, how do you characterize what's going on in these state houses?
I think they're scared to death that they're going to lose. I think they're scared to death that they're going to lose. They feel like they've been in power for a while, and they have been. They have no new ideas. They only know how to shoot down the ideas that exist and pay off their friends. And they really, if you read their thing, they have no ideas. They're not looking to the future at all. All they're doing is trying to protect what they perceive as the past that belonged to them. And so, of course, they don't believe in democracy. They never did. I mean, they didn't want people to vote ever. And they don't want to hear what Joe Schmo down the road thinks unless he's on their team. So, but again, it's sort of like the Taliban. Well, maybe not as crazy as the Taliban, but they don't know how to govern. They haven't been governing anytime they've been in charge. They're not governing in Alaska right now, for sure. We're the ones that are in charge. They're just spending their time doing stuff that's of no consequence, and I just think they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose their power, and then where will they be? They don't know how to not do anything else.
But if they end up getting all these laws passed, absent a federal law protecting the right to vote, could they succeed?
Well, they might be able to succeed, but isn't that going to harm them too? I mean, they're assuming that the only people that are going to be affected by this are the people that vote for somebody else. And I'm not sure that's accurate. I'm not sure Ron DeSantis and, not having any all the problems in Florida, I'm not sure he's just killing off the people that won't vote for him.
Well, that's a point there. That's going to be our last question, but let's move on to Merrick here. How do you see this thing playing out, Merrick? Or how would you characterize the legislation that is passing in these state houses now?
Election integrity is the white supremacist way of saying Jim Crow 2.0. This does not surprise me that they are making a major power grab because, and I'm going to go back to this again, demographic anxiety is driving this.
Yeah.
They know that they are outnumbered. On the planet, most of the planet is people of color. So planetary wise, Europeans make up a small fraction of the human population. That reality has not manifested itself in the United States up until this century. They are deathly afraid of losing their standing. Their superiority complex is in trouble. And so they are doing whatever they can to stop the inevitable, but it's already too late. My fear is this, that we have groups of young people particularly who are not voting, who are not interested in voting, who don't want to vote. Voter apathy is also a problem that helps them win. Also too, with this thing with the legislatures, I think I recall something where that was commonplace in early America, where the legislators voted on, I think they picked the senators or something like that. So this is a thing that has happened before. So I think that people like they're genuinely scared. And as someone just mentioned, they have no platform. What are they conserving? Are they basically straight white male power? But in the end, they're already outnumbered and they don't know what to do. But this.
So if they do this, do you think there's any chance of them holding on to power if they manage to succeed, absent a federal law protecting voter rights?
They will hold on to power for maybe if everything goes according to their plan, they'll be in power for the next 40 to 50 years if everything goes to in their favor, right? Because it's like separate but equal. That it was like what, almost 100 years before that law was overturned. This is what we're looking at. They want to return to the past, and a good 2/3 of the country wants to move forward. This relationship is untenable, and we're going to have to figure out what's going on. We're going to have to solve it. But these people are bent on having power because, I mean, and think about it too. For some of these people, this is a religious crusade. Okay. So they've been primed. The pump has been primed. They've been brainwashed for this moment. And so we really need to put pressure on progressive legislators, people who can make these decisions, and tell them we need to expand the right to vote and make it easier to vote, as opposed to shrinking the vote to a known minority, straight white men.
Dan, do you think that we're in trouble here with these voter suppression laws passing these state legislatures?
If we don't pass I think we already lost the For the People Act, but if we don't pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, then it is the end of our democratic republic. We'll just become a regular republic then, because the voice of the people will not matter anymore. But the Republican Party has not wanted to make it easier to vote probably since the 1970s. I believe that was the earliest time that I've heard of them saying things to actively try to suppress the vote, because the demographics are shifting into groups that traditionally don't vote Republican. So if the Republican Party is only supported by a shrinking, aging demographic, then you've got two choices. You can make everybody else not vote, or you can bring in new blood. They have decided that the way to go is to make people not vote, or to make those votes not count. And it's absolute white male supremacy, because it's the question of, am I more of a citizen than Merrick because I'm white and he's not? So should my voice be louder than that of a person of color? And their answer is yes. And the alternative answer is, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course not. But that's how they chose to see it. I think that they look at the apartheid South African government of 20 years ago as yeah, we can do this. That worked so well for them. All we got to do is keep those pesky people who want to change things and keep them disenfranchised and preferably in prison. And we won't have to worry about that. That's where the South Africans made their mistake. They let Nelson out. So I think that the end goal is to make it, you're not a white man, so your voice should not be as loud. And the voices have been expanding for 200 years. I mean, I'm real sick of the founding fathers' intention, because they didn't want women or men who did not own property, which automatically precluded every person of color from ever being able to vote. And then eventually that got changed because there was no justification for that belief system. But I think that's part of the good old days that they want to go back to.
And back to what Merrick was saying about how senators were initially constitutionally selected, it was the state legislatures that selected senators. Actually, when Abraham Lincoln was running against, what's his name, Douglas, in the 1858 election, he lost to the Illinois state legislature. It wasn't a popular vote thing. The Constitution later changed that, so senators are now elected by popular vote.